So you're looking to build a gaming PC, going to a Ryzen, but then you see, damn, the prices of Ryzen is super expensive. So you're looking at Intel. But Intel motherboards, especially the mid-range one, generally lacks features. But that's about to change with the B560 series. And one of the model that I will be looking at today is from Asrock. So let's go to the unboxing. Looking at the motherboard itself, it's a very nice motherboard with a neutral color scheme combination of black, silver and white. It can fit, I think, most builds. The rear I/O consists of 6 USB ports, 4 of which is USB 3.0. The rear antenna ports, the one single HDMI output for display, and the usual speaker and microphone jack. Looking at the bottom I/O, there's the usual 2 fan header, 2 USB header, the audio, and then there's also the both of the RGB header. There's also one interesting one, which is the Thunderbolt Connector, which is situated at the bottom, and along with the 2 SATAs at the end. So as far as connector is the usual affair at the bottom, except for the extra Thunderbolt port. So this motherboard actually has both the 12V RGB and the 5V ARGB header, so you're pretty much covered as far as RGB connectivity is concerned. Besides the bottom part, there's also another pair of RGB header right beside the RAM slot at the top. And just beside it, you can also see another combination of pump and fan header. There's 2 right beside the RAM slot. So there's 2 16X PCIe slots which supports crossfire. The top one is reinforced with metal, so which is quite common these days. There's also the top M.2 slot which is covered with a heat shield, and another one M.2 which is exposed at the bottom. So there's 2 M.2 slots. The extra M.2 is especially useful if you're an Optane user like myself. Another thing you can also see, there's 6 SATA ports for hard drive connectivity. Despite its low price, this motherboard has the front panel Type-C USB 3.2 Gen 1 header, which is actually a very nice feature, especially as more cases supports it. So on the top you can see the 8-pin CPU power connector. Just to mention that this motherboard actually has a 8-phase power design. So as we can see, there are 2 massive heatsink on both sides of the VRM. The heatsink has fins to help with heat dissipation. So hopefully this will help controlling the VRM temperature. But I don't think that will be much of an issue, because this motherboard is not really designed for massive overclocks with K-SKUs, Intel CPUs. So we should be fine. So overall, I am impressed with the feature set that this motherboard provides, especially considering the low price of around $110 or 450 ringgit Malaysia. Although after this, we are going to go deep dive into the feature set that is this motherboard, not just specifically for Asrock, but in general the B560 lineup from Intel, because there are some fundamental difference between this generation and the previous B460 motherboards. So the first one we are looking at is, so now the video is going to be a bit ad hoc. So right now we are inside the Uefi Bios for the Asrock. We are going to the advanced mode settings. So as we can see, that there's not really nothing that you need to do. This motherboard natively supports my memory kit of 3200 MHz. And it automatically loads the XMP profile of the RAM. So right now the RAM is running at its maximum speed of 3200 MHz instead of the previous generation, which tops out at 2933 MHz for RAM speed, if I'm not mistaken. So on to the next feature is actually the base frequency boost. So this is actually not a B560 feature per se, but actually this has been a feature on previous Intel mid-range motherboard. So what base frequency does is actually increase the power limit of the CPU from 65 watt to 125 watt, the base power limit. So what this allows is actually it allows the CPU to sustain the maximum all-core clock speed indefinitely, instead of throttling down when it reaches the power limit like usual. So actually this allows even a non-K CPU to act like a K CPU in that it can sustain a higher all-core frequency. So I will show you a bit later the example, so it will make a bit more sense after this. Okay, so this is the test that we're going to do. As you can see, the clock speed is currently fluctuating, but this is without base frequency boost. Okay, once you start the stress test, you can see that the speed spikes to around 4.6 megahertz. But then you can see that the processor cannot sustain that speed. After a bit, it will start throttling down. We're going to speed up a bit. So as you can see, after around 40 seconds, you can see that the core clock is now reduced to around 3.8 to 3.9 megahertz. So as you can see, it cannot sustain the 4.6 megahertz all core overclock. So this is where after this we will switch on the base frequency boost and you can see the difference. So now on to our second test. This one we activated the base frequency boost inside of the Asrock BIOS. So as you can see right now, it's not doing anything. So the processor speed is fluctuating wildly between 2 to 3 gigahertz. So we're going to start the stress test, and you can see just like before, the core clocks all jump to 4.6, around 4.5 to 4.6. So the difference, the initial part is the same, but you can see that it can maintain this indefinitely. We will speed things up and you can see the results after this. We are going to speed up and skip time a bit. So as you can see, after around 9 minutes, you can see that the processor is still maintaining the high clock speed of around 4.6 gigahertz all core. So with this feature, it makes the question of is K CPU in Intel lineup relevant anymore, because previously you cannot do this, but now with this feature, since the B460 motherboard arrived, I have known Asrock to be one of the first to have this feature integrated in their motherboard. So there's really not much difference between the normal CPU and the K CPU. Sure, you can overclock the K CPU a bit more, but you know that comes with a lot with the price of a lot more heat and a lot more power consumption. So I think this is a very good feature, and this is the first time I'm using a non-K Intel CPU actually. But I'm really impressed regarding the performance of the CPU, and of course the performance of the Asrock motherboard for allowing this feature and maintaining this feature. So kudos to Asrock and kudos to Intel also. Now, another feature that people always like to shit on an Asrock is I think the Polychrome Sync app for controlling the RGB. So in my experience, the Asrock Polychrome Sync is not the best, but it's not the worst either. So as you can see, I can easily link my GPU, my RAM and everything to sync the motherboard, to sync the RGB. There's really no issue. I don't see why people are always telling me Asrock problematic software, etc, etc, because from my experience, as you can see, you can easily switch between rainbow mode or strobing mode or static color modes. So for me, there's really no issue as far as RGB controller is concerned. As you can see, it syncs up fine, no issue. With my Cooler Master AIO, it syncs up with my XPG UFM, and of course the Asrock graphic card, the Phantom Gaming 6900 XT. So RGB wise, as far as feature wise, I think it's adequate. For most people, I think it's adequate. If you really want like really minute adjustment of RGB, maybe it's not possible, because I've noticed, like for example, if you go into the rainbow mode, you can't really set the speed or duration of the rainbow. You can only set like rainbow RGB, tom yum, go, something like that, but you cannot like do minute changes. So if you're into that, maybe the Asrock motherboard is not for you. But I think for most people, for 90% of people, if you're just looking to sync your AIO cooler with your RAM, with your graphic card RGB, it's fine, no issues at all. So as usual, conclusion time. So should you get the Asrock B560M motherboard? If you're keen on Ryzen and maybe you got a good deal for the new 5000 series CPU, maybe you got it at MSRP, then maybe you should just stick at Ryzen. Because the thing with Ryzen is that even getting a mid-range motherboard gives you almost all of the features of a full-fledged X570 motherboard. But if you're going for Intel, because the prices of Ryzen CPUs right now is just absurd, both for the 3000 series and for the 5000 series, then you should definitely consider this motherboard. Because actually, even I'm surprised right now that Asrock is only charging 470 ringgit for this motherboard, considering it's a new motherboard, new chipset, comes with Thunderbolt, comes with USB-C support, has good integrated Wi-Fi and Bluetooth support. For just 470, I mean, like, when I saw it, I thought it was like a price error or something. But then when I got it that I just saw that, yeah, actually Asrock sells it at that price, which is a great value, considering previously, for like, I mean, you couldn't get any good motherboard for around 400 ringgit with integrated Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and this has it all. Even it also comes with decent, it also has, I mean, decent VRMs, and it also has what you might call it, even there's also, I also forgot to mention, there's also RGB actually on the motherboard itself, just like the previous Steel Legend. So I mean, there's motherboard RGB accent. So I mean, this feature pack, I'm struggling to think what features that's not available for this motherboard. Maybe, I guess the VRM could be better. Maybe if it were a 10-phase VRM, then I guess the performance would be better. But otherwise, really, it's really feature pack. I'm surprised that Asrock sells it at quite a low price. And this begs the question, because the Pro4 is so damn good, where does it leave the Steel Legend, which is the higher tier model? What advantage, what features does the Steel Legend possibly have to compel me to pay a bit more and get that one, instead of just saving my money and just get this B560? So anyway guys, get this motherboard if you're keen on using Intel 10th gen or 11th gen CPU. It's a very good motherboard, very feature packed. There's not really low price, not much flaws. Otherwise, that's all I have to say. If I were to give it out of 10, I would give it 9 out of 9.5, because I really cannot see any flaws on this motherboard. Anyway guys, as usual, do the usual YouTube stuff. Help me by liking and sub my channel. It really helps me a lot. You guys don't know how much it helps me, especially as a growing content creator. I try to upload every 2 weeks, but you know, sometimes work and family gets in the way. So if you like this kind of content, do consider subscribing and share it if you find it useful. Anyway guys, see you guys next time.